Construction loans made easy.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time.
How you doing, Ed? It's great to see you. Thanks for
You
taking me.
too. All right, appraisals. Now, appraisals are a huge thing when it comes to construction loans. Inherently, I always feel bad because clients, they go through this process, this design process for a long time. They start the loan, they get approved subject to the appraisal, and the appraisal is the last thing that comes into play. And in some cases, it could make or break a project for a client if they needed a loan. Obviously, if they don't need a loan, if they're a cash buyer, then none of that matters. It's just a matter of getting the designs and moving forward. So I guess just a initial background. You tell me a little bit about yourself, when you got into appraising, how you got into it, and I guess really specifically for this, how you got into construction appraising.
Well, so I've been in appraising since 1993, so we're looking at 32 years at this. Because originally what I wanted to get into was being an architect. So strangely, the appraisal portion of it kind of played right into like this progression that's taken place over the last 30 years, where I wanted to do architecture stuff, but the way that the thing was playing out at that time in life, the opportunities weren't as great, and I chose a different path down the appraisal road as it seemed like it would kind of work. And I started doing construction appraisals in earnest probably after being into the business for, I don't know, 5, 6 years, something like that. Once I kind of really understood, reading a market, looking up, finding the data that was necessary to be able to address value. Well, can we morph into this other part of the business, which at that point in time was kind of taking off in a big way? And I'm like, yeah, this is a good fit. So if we took this camera down and went down into my my archives downstairs, you'd see that I've got just stacks and stacks of blueprints from the 30 years of doing this. And I've got a fairly sizable office, so we have a bunch of appraisers. So we get to work together to kind of navigate the pieces of this more a multi-headed animal at this point. We've got myself, who's been at it for a long time. My mentor and uncle, who started the company, he's been doing this for longer than I have, and he built houses and did the appraisal game. So he's been doing both of those. So he has a deep understanding of it. And then I've got
there's certain appraisers that don't want to do new construction, right? And certain ones that simply just don't understand it, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different animal than a standard like first mortgage, refinance, or purchase appraisal, where you're looking at an existing structure. You can go feel it, see it, touch it, smell it, understand the physical makeup of the property firsthand, versus a more conceptual appraisal, which is what a construction loan is. And some people just don't have that skill set or
as an architect
to obtain it.
Getting into architecture and understanding plans, that certainly is why you're an expert on that.
Yeah, so that was kind of how I got into it. And I've been doing it for 32 years, I guess, and we'll call the construction end of it somewhere in the range of 20 to 25, I guess we would call it at this point. So I've seen a few.
So I'm not going to bore people with the appraisal independence laws and regulations because we want them to stay engaged here. But there's been some big changes on appraisals in the last 32 years, for sure. In the quote unquote old days, you would have mortgage brokers or banks reach out to you directly and kind of let you know what they're looking for in terms of value and all that. That all changed. And even the people and how appraisals are ordered has changed as well. So who hires you? Do consumers hire you for doing work just separate from a loan, or maybe before a construction loan starts? I would imagine most of the time it's banks. Are they hiring you directly, or is it through some different third-party entities?
So it's kind of overwhelmingly, it's, I'm fortunate we do just a bunch of direct lender work where the lender can select my firm and say, okay, we want you guys to do this appraisal for us. I've got a staff that handles that. Myself can handle any of the properties that come in. There's appraisal management companies, which then plays as like an intermediary between the lender and the appraiser, so they can either handle a
The
wider
independent,
spectrum of
right?
life, so they can hit the whole country, or they can also put a layer of independence in there, because it used to be you could stop and talk about values, even though it's a protection layer to make sure that nobody's steering the outcome of the report, right? That's where our job is to remain independent and objective, not have a stake in the game other than just do an ethically good job and find the truth and explain it to people. So I will say that there has been a number of times recently where in this construction venue, I've had private people call and say, hey, listen, I'm considering building a house. And they actually put the cart before the horse before the cart, which is in my head how I think it maybe ought to go conceptually. Like we're almost backwards at this point when we say, okay, you're going to come with plans and specs, and the people are now all in love with the idea, and we're going to build this fantastic dream home. And then they're going to go, oh, wait, we got to figure out how much it's worth.
Right.
After you've done all of the other parts of it and go,
And how much
wait,
money I need to put in now.
correct. Like, and then we're brought in on the backside, which sometimes is complicated, as you can imagine. But I have seen an uptick in that type of work, which has been interesting. I'm not sure if that's a function of the economy or just the reality that, there's a lot of moving parts to these construction projects.
And I think that's always a good idea. Clients will ask me from time to time, when we initially engage about a construction loan, can I get an appraisal ahead of time before applying for the loan? And my answer always is you absolutely can, but you need to understand that that appraisal can't be used for the loan. For the very specific reason you just mentioned, right? Independent. So, a lender, the regulators in the mortgage world don't want you and I as consumers to go pick our appraisal company, get an appraisal, and then be able to use that for a loan, because
Yes.
maybe we're asking for a higher number than an independent
Right.
appraisal might be. But that being said, as long as they're going into that relationship and experience with the appraiser and saying, don't give me a number I want to hear, let me know what a fair market appraisal is. Now, every appraiser is going to probably be a little bit different. It's every appraiser is going to have a different number, but you would like to think that certainly it's going to be plus or minus 5% of the value, or so-called opinion of value, and not much different than that, I would think.
You would hope. I mean, obviously, the more complex the property, the more opportunity, I guess you could say, that where there could be some variations. I mean, the more complex it is, there's more layers to the onion that need to be explained and researched and made sure that they're properly understood. So, the value of the appraiser at that point now becomes pretty integral, that they understand what's happening and take the time to research and analyze and ask pointed questions to go, hey, what are we dealing with here, to make sure they understand it, because at the end of the day, it's a concept.
In those type of situations, do the clients ask you for feedback on? So let's say they're building a project for X, and you come back and say it's worth 95% of X. Do they come back and say, what could I change that might provide me more value in my design?
I have had that question. I mean, there's a variety of times when that type of a scenario comes up where, we think, the value of the house is $100. We'll use a ridiculous number since we all know you can't build for $100 anywhere. But if it came back at 95 and they're like, well, what happened? We do have the opportunity to vet through that and kind of work through the nuances of the project. There's a variety of reasons. Sometimes people aren't looking at the market itself thinking, well, my house is, I'm spending 100, but the market hasn't shown 100 yet. Maybe they're only showing 95. They're not proving out that that house has something so significantly different that it's now better than everything else in the market. And in the lending universe, we're obviously looking at ranges, right? We're trying to make sure that we're keeping the bowling ball between the gutters, kind of, to use an analogy. Sure. But you want to make sure that you're keeping it, within a reasonable set of circumstances. And if you're outside of the market, is it that the market just hasn't caught that up yet? Or are you adding something that isn't necessary, but a desire, which then you're welcome to still do those things. But then that it's your skin in the game versus the banks, I guess, at that point, which,
And we'll talk about some of the challenges, especially at the higher end of the markets here in a few minutes.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But yeah, and to your point, it's most people, 99% of the people are getting that appraisal right at the end, right before they want to close, right before they want to start their construction. So there's a lot of stress related.
Yes, the pressure's on. They're ready to,
right?
Yes, everybody's
been have the opportunity to do that ahead of time. It's certainly recommended, just as long as they understand you can't use that appraisal for the loan, and you've got to pay for it, obviously. And that's something that the consumer would negotiate with the appraiser directly.
I've been seeing it at an early place, though, too, where the numbers haven't started to really start to come into the game. It's more of like conceptually, like, hey, is this a good idea? Should I be considering this, and what else is going on out there? It's almost more of like a consulting type of an assignment for my purposes, and I'm always careful to share with them, like, listen, we can absolutely help you vet this part out so you can come into the process armed with data before you get into the falling in love stage, and then the dreaming stage, and then the sales stage of like the construction project. Like, of course, everybody wants the best, but now you have to figure out how to mitigate too much cost.
There are some people that they understand that they're not going to get the appraised value they want or need, but they also believe that they're going to be in this home for 20 or 30 years.
Sure.
And they want what they want, and they in some cases have the means to cover that difference. But
as they should. It's a big project. I mean,
big project. Yeah. Let's get into the process a little bit. So, process for ordering an appraisal on a construction loan is different than, let's just call it, a straight purchase, right? And then as an appraiser, a straight purchase, for the most part, you need a copy of the contract and an order. On construction loans, there's just one appraisal that's required, just like a regular loan. And they're doing the appraisal based on the project itself. So maybe tell me a little bit about what you need as an appraiser to be able to execute on that appraisal order, and maybe from a minimum perspective as well as an ideal perspective, because sure. There are clients that they want to get started very, very quickly, and sometimes they don't have the ideal set of items that an appraiser may want to do an appraisal.
So, and we'll start with the ideal, and then what we can leave off if we absolutely have to, I think, is probably the best way to attack this problem. So I definitely need to have all of the facts. There's many of the facts as possible about the process, like with the order or very short range order to when I'm getting the order. If you have the order, I can at least start vetting that process out. Where is the property? What's the market doing in that particular area? So I can start to crystallize things in my head as to where things could be landing. I need blueprints or some type of a format that I can just say, here's how big the house is scheduled to be. And, we do have the ability to say, okay, we were given this information. We've based our conclusions on this exact information. realizing that the whole thing is a hypothetical process, right? It's not done yet, so we're deciding today what it is could be worth today based on the information that we were given. At some future date will be done. So we're assuming a lot of those assumptions are being put into place. But the cleaner that information is, the closer the analysis can be to come to what we will believe to be the final market value. So some type of a representation of what the property is going to be. If it's new construction completely, a set of blueprints or at least the rough foundation plan and a room layout so we can kind of see how the place is going to flow, that have some form of dimensioning on them, because we have to be able to create what we believe to be the square footage. We can't just take the word for it.
So those initial schematics that don't have dimensions on it really are worthless to you, I would assume.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if it's a napkin sketch with a couple of scribbles on it, that's
Right.
probably not going to get it done. But I mean, even if it's not down to the fine points of like where the can light's going to go and stuff like that, we don't need to have all of that right away. We do need to know how to generate the size of the place, the basic functionality, the flow, to be able to kind of gather that. Um, and then we need to know some type of a rendering of what they think this thing's going to appear as. The the more detailed, the better, obviously, because we're dealing in a world of I don't really know what the place is going to be until we've seen the sticks start to go up. Um, we need to have some type of a budget. And I've seen them as loose as rounded to the nearest $5,000 increments. When I see those, I know full well that we're early on in the process, or we've got somebody that said, "I can spend X, fit that box for me," and then they're filling out that way, just to fill in some boxes, and then that's when the digging would have to start on my side to talk to the builder, talk to the owner, and kind of interview those things. But bare bones, you got to have at least some kind of a sketch that'll tell me what this thing is going to be size wise, a way to figure out what their mind's eye is showing for what this project's going to look like in the end, at least close. We need to know where it's going to be, so where is the parcel of land that you're putting this property on? And this is in a purely a custom scenario where you don't, like, if it's a tract subdivision, they can tell us it's going to be lot 35, 40, 50. It's going to be one of these three or four.
Actually,
I can get to the answer there. But in a purely custom world, I need to know the lot. I need to know, is there demolition taking place? Where, when, what are the level of materials that we're talking about? We need to start having some of those things refined.
like a spec sheet, right? And I always tell clients, they'll say, do I need X? Do I need a detailed budget? Do I need spec sheets? And while sometimes we can get away with some things, I always tell them the more details we provide the appraiser, most likely the happier you are going to be of the value that you receive. So because in many cases, we'll get clients wanting to move on, get to the appraisal as quickly as possible, and they're disappointed with the numbers, and that's because the appraiser struggled to understand, what level of items that are being put into the property.
Yeah, and it's good if, and another way to kind of vet through that process is if you're using a builder that is been in the area a while, they've got some chops, so to speak. They probably have work samples, right? Other properties they've done recently where you could say, okay, Paul and Ed built this house over here in Downers Grove, Illinois. They built two of them last year. As a matter of fact, they're on this street and this street. Well, we could go over and take a peek at what that looks like from the outside, or use Google Earth or something to kind of go, oh, I see the level of quality roughly that these guys are using. That can help us start to define where that thing might be in the marketplace. Because once you get into the custom, it can range wildly from uh, a real nice house where you've got some mixture of your own design elements and custom high level craftsman type materials throughout the house, and then enter in like the type of materials all by themselves. You could go from a standard granite to some kind of a super imported soapstone from Italy. There could be any number of things, and those things all will play into the final analysis. But the more of that detail we have, the way better results you'll have, for sure.
And then in terms of when you do receive all the information, you have what you need to get the appraisal done. I always tell clients new construction appraisals take a little bit longer than a regular one. And maybe you can touch on the reasons for some of that. But tell me a little bit about that process. I know some appraisers will maybe do some market research before they head out. Some like to head out to the site first and then do the research. Is there a better or worse way of doing it, or is it just a matter of what the appraiser is comfortable with?
I think it's mostly what the appraiser is comfortable with. I mean, specifically if you know the area pretty well, you've kind of got an idea of like roughly where the place is going to be, and since the structure is not going to be on the site, outside of a spectacular site, something like that you really need to see.
Something on a lake with frontage, for example.
Yeah, something like that, where like maybe there's some elevation changes or some the way that they're going to position it for to catch a special view or something like that. Like those things are all key to the final determination of value. But if you're in a neighborhood where what we're seeing a lot of right now is because most of the area where I'm at is fully developed. So there's a lot of houses that are old and they've been loved, and now it's time to be reloved in a different format. So they're getting taken down,
Right.
and I don't need to see that. I don't need to go see the little old bungalow that's been sitting there for 70 years and is beat up now. I don't need to see that. That's not helping me get to the answer. And I know the neighborhood. So generally in those situations, I'd rather spend my time effectively digging and understanding the full scope of the project before I spend any time driving. Because when I go to look, I want to look at the site. But then I also want to make sure that the sales that they're giving us, that I'm using, make sense. You go, oh, okay, this one's going to feel an awful lot like that one did. So that then now I know I'm refining my range. So
Clients or builders often give you addresses of homes that they believe are representative of their home and their hopeful or expected value.
the good ones will, for sure. I mean, I'll just say it like it is. I mean, if they're an unknown quantity, that tends to make it a little bit more complicated. Doesn't mean anything. I mean, I've seen some absolutely spectacular guys come into the business and build show-stoppingly beautiful homes that they're like, yeah, I moved in from the commercial side of life, and I decided that I wanted to try my hand at this, and they've built spectacular homes that are it's near perfection. But they don't have they could say, well, yeah, I built the storage building over here, and I've done an industrial plant over there, but that's not a house. Um, but the good ones that have been around a while, they're going to have a portfolio of things that they've done, and they should want to share it, really. I mean, to brag a little bit on their skills. If they're going to sell you their services, they probably ought to show you what they're capable of. And that's super helpful for us, because then we can go, okay, I get it. They've built 20 of these houses of some variety, and here's the level of quality. And, the proof of concept is a big deal at that point.
And that's one thing I think is real important for clients and consumers who are going to be building these homes is try to make sure that your builder's on board to doing some of that, selling the project a little bit to the appraiser. And I know there occasionally I just hear of some builders that will just not want to be involved with that. And that really can be a detriment to the appraisal. Being able to, like you said, be able to point to similar projects they've done in the area, or having a really full conversation with the appraiser about, what this home is going to look like outside and in, is important, because you can get as much detail on paper, right? But the explanation really kind of supports it. You can see numbers on a budget that's broken out. Why is what's the difference between 40,000 in flooring to 80,000 in flooring? So being able to communicate that difference is really important, and the builder is really the best person that can have that conversation with the appraiser.
Yeah, they should be for sure. I mean, that's the best thing to do is chat with them, because then you'll know right away if you talk to them and they have a solid understanding of the project already. I mean, that means they've already been invested in it. They're working to try and get it accomplished. They anybody that's been in it longer than a few minutes is going to know that they have to get through this step one way or another. Like, you can go through it, you can try and go around it, but no lender's going to go around it. They're just not. And at the end of the day, the person driving the entire thing is the person that they're trying to build the house for. So, they're driving all of it for every last one of us. While we're not advocating for them, we are in fact a piece of the puzzle that is there to help protect them, also inform them, and do the same thing for the lender. And in most of the circumstances I've been having with the builders, I sit and chat with them a bit and go, okay, what else have you done? How are you finding it? And what are your challenges right now? Because we're all facing changes in the market and the way that things are done, construction practices, permitting, all of the regulations that are on literally every piece of this equation. So if we all know what the challenges are we're facing, we can kind of navigate through them. And
absolutely. And as we discussed, you as an appraiser have a lot of regulators looking over you. You've got to answer to regulators, you've got to answer to banks. But my general sense is appraisers don't want to be the one person that kills a deal, right? They want to, they would love to be able to provide a number that works for the client. But in the same respects, they're independent. They need to provide what they believe is a true market opinion of value. So at the end of the day, I see more appraisers just really saying, just provide me the information I need to be able to support the value or higher value that you're looking for.
What's interesting, I don't know, while the easy path for sure would be to say, yeah, I want every one of them to come in and like, okay, it was land plus cost equals X. The appraisal is X plus a little. That's what everybody would like in concept would like to see. Everybody wants to feel the warm fuzzy that they were smarter than the last guy, and they built a house that is just worth a little tiny bit more than the last one that was built, and they got themselves a deal. As a business portion of it, on the small side of that coin, I think you're right. That's totally the case. The other part of the coin is these people, whether they have the financial means or not, I have to take that out of my equation and go, it doesn't matter to me whether they can or can't afford it. Because, if I'm being honest, like 90% of the houses that I've done appraisals on like that, I couldn't afford it. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. So I have to pretend that I can't, and nor can they. So we're just going to give them facts so that they can make a conscious decision on how they're going to proceed. So, and more times than not, I found that people appreciate that. When you like, it has to be right though. You can't just do it and go, well, 1 + 1 = 2, and that's how much I'm spending, and that's how much your appraisal should be. They should want me to be looking at it as an objective person that's not married to the sales part of it, because the builder is going to try and sell things, which they should. That's what they're in business to do. They're wonderfully gifted at it. You're going into a situation where you are very emotionally tied to it. They're not typically, these aren't done on this level for a financial transaction, other than it is a financial transaction, but they're not going into it with that thought process. They're like, I want to live in this house. I would like it to be like this. And now I want my dreams to pop up in the middle of this structure. So you're emotionally tied to it. I'm not tied to any of those things. I just want to go, well, okay, yeah, I get it. And what an awesome place. But here's the facts. And
to that point, I did a project, did a loan, didn't close one time, where it appraised out about 55% of total cost, land plus construction. And of course, we see that and we're like, wow, what's going on here, right?
yeah,
Is this it can't just be one thing. And sent it to the client, and of course they were befuddled. And as throughout about a week period of time, we come to find out that they bought a piece of land from somebody they knew for about 4x what it was worth. And and a lot of times when people buy land, it can be private sales in a lot of cases, cash deals, private sales, no appraisal required, which was this situation. So they ended up selling the land and not moving forward on that property. But to your point, just the facts, right? And so they were initially angry, confused, but when it was all said and done, they were really happy that they found out what that project was really worth.
I mean, God forbid they went through with it and got it done, and then they're sitting there at the end of the day with all of this debt service to it, and they're sitting on something they thought was going to be this dream, and it turns out to be a nightmare. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. I wouldn't even be able to sleep if I knew I was involved in any part of that, short of the guy that said, hey, man, you might want to take a quick peek at this land. There's a problem here.
Exactly. Let's talk about comps, comparables.
Yeah.
So new construction appraisals are different than a straight purchase, but in concept, they're really very, very similar, if not the same. A comparable for a purchase, if someone's buying a $500,000 home, that's 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2,000 square feet, the appraiser is going to be looking at similar homes like that, ideally that have sold within 6 to 12 months, 1 to 3 miles of that property. The new construction appraisal, although they're going to be working off plans and budget, is really not any different, right? They're going to build a home that, say, is 2,000 square feet, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. So they're going to be looking, as the appraiser is going to be looking for homes that fit those characteristics. Tell me a little bit about on new construction appraisals. How do you approach looking for comparables any differently than say a straight purchase, or are they pretty much the same?
It's relatively the same. I mean, obviously, once you've got an understanding what the property is, you're still going to be going through your process. And every appraiser has a slightly different take on how they're going to filter out the massive amount of data that's out there. I mean, there really is. We're very blessed to have a ton of data. Our MLS system is great now. It used to be terrible. I remember carrying books around where I'm looking through like an old phone book trying to find a comp. It was a nightmare. Now we can I can jump on my phone. I could do it. I can do it anywhere and look for comparables for a property, which is great. So for me, I personally like to take kind of a two-headed approach to it. Like, I'm going to look at the broad market first and go, okay, what is the overarching flavor of where we are? Each town, each neighborhood is going to have a slightly different bend on what's going on. And I want to know what those parameters are first, to go, okay, what is everybody else doing first before we look at like this micro piece of the equation. So once I've got that kind of filtered down, then I'm going to start looking for statistically similar houses, right? Just a paper version, like, okay, give me all the 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 3,000 square foot houses that sold in the last year in this area. Depending on where you are, you might get a whole bunch and you might have to filter through it. And then once I've done that, I kind of start turning it to a little bit more of an organic set of circumstances, where then I'm going to start looking a little bit closer at the the curb appeal kind of stuff, and what does it look like? I mean, at the end of the day, we're visual creatures, right? So we're you're going to pull up in front of a house and go, oh my gosh, that thing is spectacularly beautiful, and you can pull up in front of one of those, and then statistically, the house right next door is the same thing, except for you look at it, you're like, that is not the same thing at all, not even close. So I try to just filter it both ways, because it's kind of art when you're in this part of the equation. You've already learned figured out the concept of the house, and then the facts of the house. So I kind of reverse the flow a little bit at that point of it. And I go, okay, give me the statistical showing of what theoretically this house should be worth, and then let me start to sift it finer by going, okay, which one looks like this? So um, and deep diving into all the photographs, calling the realtors, asking the builders, like, hey, have you seen any of these? Because asking questions it turns out to be one of the better ways to get good answers. Excuse me, you can vet out an awful lot of noise by asking a few questions and being critically thinking through it, which is the whole process of doing the appraisal anyhow.
Now, of course, on new construction, that's a brand new home, 0 years old. So quite often, the comparables that you're pulling up may not actually have. There might not be a lot of comparables available, right? Not ideal comparables. So, how do you work through that challenge? Are you looking at homes that are newish, maybe, and then making adjustments? How does that work?
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely one of the things that we have to do, and really, it's a reasonable expectation, because once the house is done, right, the people move in. It's no longer a new house. So now it's a used house, kind of like a used car, except for the value usually goes up. We'll allow for that access right now, without me saying they always go up, because they don't, but it can, and most of the time it should. If things are moving well for everyone, that's what happens. But it's no longer a brand new house, so you're going to be comparing it to something that is in place. I'm very fortunate in the area where I'm at. Is it's a pretty active area. I mean, I'm in the greater Chicagoland area, and I mean, there is new construction to be found. I mean, you can find it all over. There's builders that have built high level spec homes, which spec home and custom, there's two schools of thought depending on the level of quality of that spec built house. You can absolutely compare it if you know which ones they are and you look carefully at it. Um, but then somebody that, for instance, built one 5 years ago, and they put all of their love and care into creating this super nice custom home, and life happened, and they decided they needed to move or divorce or change positions in the world, and that happens. So those things do come on the market, and they are valuable pieces of data, because really you're building a concept, and unless you're in a tract subdivision, you have to be able to find something that's as similar as possible.
And when you're, of course, in custom construction, I would imagine that's probably the biggest challenges that you have, right? So if somebody buys land for, call it $100,000, and then wants to spend $400,000 to build a $500,000 project, that shows up as $100,000 sales comp, right? Land sales comp, and it doesn't show up as a $500,000 build. Generally speaking, builders don't put the final price, again, unless it's a tract home builder, they're not putting that final price on there, right?
Right. I mean, that's that would be the ideal, if we could take the cost plus land model and use that for comparables. But obviously, there's so many areas where that could get messy and actually probably harm the consumer, truthfully, because there's just no way to vet out who is a better negotiator and all those pieces. So, the completed transactions, where it's everything sold together is what we have to use for a comp. I can't take, I've had builders ask me like, oh, the Smiths bought this lot for 250 and I put 800,000 on top of it. So, it's $1,000,001. And I'm like, well, how did you get the 1,000,001? A, and B, the other part is like, well, unfortunately, you didn't sell the property. You sold 800,000 and the land was already there. So,
And back in the old days, we would see appraisers, not often, but every once in a while with, there's very few comps, would actually go to a builder that built. And if the builder agreed to provide them information on the project, might use what the completed project cost. But I would imagine just various bank rules, regulations, that just simply not an option any longer.
not as a fixed comparable unless you have a recorded transaction, like a full arm's length transaction where there was a buyer and seller in consideration in the whole 9 yards, and it was recorded with the county. That's not a sale. Now that data that they're giving you though is valuable as a extra bit of information, right? Like these are complicated, so you should be taking the time to vet some of that out because that is meaningful data. It's just not something that I can come in and just hang my hat on and say, well, that's the number. We can't do that, but we can say, well, here's what we were told, and here's the data that they provided us. I mean, I had builders go so far as to give me like their settlement statement where they said, here's what I charged these folks to build this house. Okay, cool. So we know that several other people took that number
Did a
and said,
similar thing, yeah.
I can build that. I'm good. It didn't sell, but it was a transaction that they're showing me, and I can go, okay, there's signatures, there's people there. I can comment on that and say, hey, I know that people are doing it, which helps me when I get to a point where I'm like at that fringe part of the market we were talking about before, where, like you're at the 195 number. You're like, oh gosh, we're close. I mean, it's probably there, but the market just hasn't proven it out yet. How do I explain that? Because if we don't do that, the market never moves, right? Like you can't change the top side if somebody doesn't actually do it. And
So would that play out where you might put together an appraisal, have your comparables that meet the traditional MLS stuff and data that you can cross-reference, and it might not be ideal maybe for an appraisal review group. So that additional information that you put in there, more the narrative, which I always tell clients, don't just go to page 2 and look at the number. Look through all the entire appraisal report, because the appraiser does a lot of work and he puts a lot of information in there on how they got to that number. So is that where you would put that maybe in the narrative to give a little more support for it?
percent, yeah. I mean that's with an appraisal, of course, the old adage is everybody's gonna the first and only thing anybody really really truly cares about is the number on page 3, right? They scroll down, they're like, yep, the value's there, let's keep moving. The only time you ever hear anything as an appraiser is when that number doesn't match what somebody else thought, high or low. If it's way outside of the boundaries, that's usually when I hear questions and things like that, and I go, did you read the addendum? Because I wrote, a dissertation on what land values have been doing, and
especially when they reply back to your email in 30 seconds. They didn't
right,
read
right,
anything other than the value. A lot of what we just talked about relates to new builds, brand new builds. A lot of people do construction loans for rehabs, minor, major rehab additions. Is the appraisal approach different there? Because with a brand new build, you've got a set of plans, you've got a budget, you've got specs. You can assume everything is new. Where with maybe a gut rehab or major rehab addition, you can't assume all that, correct?
yeah, no, those add a whole added layer of complexity to them because now you're blending all of these things, and there is value still for the old, and then there's value for the new, and then how are you marrying those two things together? So those are ones where I see appraisers that have taken them, and I'm like, you really better know what you're doing because it's a little bit
Not
different.
easy. Right.
It's and you could look at new sales, you could look at old houses, and you could look at renovated houses, but when there's additions and things, you'd really better be paying a little bit closer attention to how that's all going to go. And then the one real nice thing about doing those though is you get to hear the homeowner, because a lot of times with new construction you don't really talk to the homeowner very often.
Yeah, because you need to,
Usually,
yeah, on those appraisals, you can't drive by and take a picture of an empty lot. You have to
right,
go inside that property and just like a
right,
traditional appraisal.
sure, and then we have to be cognizant of the fact that, like, one, I don't want to give you any knowledge of what I think the value is until I've done my homework. I mean, everybody wants to know when we walk in, hey, what do you think it's worth? Like, do I know what I think it's worth? Yeah, probably. I got an idea, but if I'm being honest, I try to stay away from understanding the value of a house until after I've
You see
gone
it.
through it, because you're really hard pressed to unsee things. Like if I started down a path and said, "Oh, I think this thing's going to be worth $200,000," and I walk into the house and I'm like, "Wow, this is not 200,000, either good or bad, right?" Like, but you still are playing with that number in your head, like you can't unsee it. So, for me, I like to know that I've gone in and like seen it through the person's eyes who have decided to take on this task. I mean, it's a big undertaking they're going with, and there's a reason why they're doing it. Whether it be smart or foolish, we won't know until we get through the numbers part of it. But to be able to understand the project, you better be able to kind of get a visual of it through their eyes because they're the ones that started that piece of it. So,
The
um,
big difference on the new construction appraisal is clients will ask me, how often does the appraisal hit the number, right? And the number on a brand new build, for example, would be cost of land plus cost of construction. And I was explaining to them it's not like a purchase. Purchase, 95+% of the time, if you're buying a house for 700,000, the appraiser is most likely going to come into 700,000. Some people say, well, they're just backing into the number. Based on conversations I've had with appraisers over the years, generally they say if this home sold in an open market for 700,000, it's generally a good indicator of what the value is, unless there's something significant to push them either other way. Now, on a new construction appraisal, it happens a lot less, right? If they're going to build a $700,000 project, while the appraiser knows what they spent on land, they have the budget, they know what they're going to spend on build. I would say 95% of the time is coming in plus or minus 5%, but it doesn't always come at that number. I guess what are some of those reasons why there might be more variability on the value or so-called opinion of value on a new construction appraisal than, say, a straight purchase?
okay. So if everybody's done their homework, right, there's a reasonable chance that it should come awfully close, right? You know, the you, in the higher the level of the project, the assumption is that the parties coming together have done their homework, right? The builder knows what they're doing. They know how to price a project. They know what the labor costs are. They know what the material costs are. They know what they need for their overhead. They've done that homework. They know. The person who bought the lot sought out a whole bunch of different lots, and they figured out that, okay, the land value at this point is X amount of dollars. They figured that part out and they pulled the trigger, bought the land. So then you took that number and you took that number, and now I'm assuming more times than not that same person has also gone, do I want to deal with building this house, or could I go buy the one that they have just sitting over there and I could take my stuff from this house to that house and I'm done? So they've already done those exercises and they know that they're in a reasonable range. So, doing all of those things, short of some crazy market situation where things have gone, rates jumped out of the sky like they did, right after the COVID craziness, the, rates went through the roof and everybody's like, what just happened here? Now it's taken some time for us all to shake it off and go, wait a minute, we're okay. We're okay. The number's not pretty like it was, but it's certainly within the range of what historically is normal. Um, Now people are getting back to it, but they're also still doing their homework. So that number should come relatively close. And so being as an appraiser, we're making sure that we've looked at all of it and said objectively, what do we think this thing is worth? You know, while the appraisal is coming to an exact number, that's because we have to be able to lend on an exact number. Somebody has to be able to say this number is the number. uh, it's a range, right? Like once you've made your adjustments, you look at properties that are between a grouping of data sets and you go, okay, then you vet those down by your adjustments and you come up with a range at the bottom. The value is going to be somewhere in that range, and the level of experience and understanding and detail that you have is going to dictate where your appraisal value is going to
which
land with.
comparable should be most likely aligned.
Sure. And in the the more recent history, people have been doing a hybrid of things where I'll look at statistically. I'll do a weighted averaging where I'll use statistical analysis to go, okay, based on the fact that this one had 3% net adjustment and this one had 45% net adjustment. On the surface, you would think those shouldn't be comparable, but they really were very similar. There was a lot of little nuances, and I then let math tell me, well, where does it land when you let the cream rise to the top and the one that's a little bit goofy? It factors in there because it should. What does that tell me? And then I can look at it and go, this house is short on square footage or high on finishes or the location's spectacular. And then you can let that be your experience going, here's why I'm pushing it to a particular point in the range, right? And then you explain that. So the things that will change that dynamic is that there's so many little X factors that you have to look at all of those pieces.
Speaking of which, so if you think about um, things, designs, aspect of a build, what would you say maybe top two or three items that it really help value, optimize value, and maybe a few that maybe are a drag on value? And does it differ from a non-construction appraisal?
Drag on value, I don't know. Like, I mean, I think your location is really a big piece of the puzzle on that part of it. What do they say? The first three rules of real estate is location, location, location. Well, that's a pretty honest conversation to have. Um, you know, your location is going to be huge. That could either be a massive benefit to you, or it could be a value sucker that you weren't prepared for because you thought, the market will catch up or whatever. That's for somebody else. If I knew how to vet that one out, we probably wouldn't be
The
talking
train
anymore.
only comes by once a day.
Yeah, right. Um, so some of the thing, kitchens and baths obviously are big deals, but with that said, within the confines of your market, right? Like if we were going to take a house in an area where like there's lots of custom homes and you decided to go to Home Depot and buy, the shaker cabinets off the showroom floor, I think you're going to be making a mistake and you're going to find out that your value is going to be crushed by that. Conversely, have a home in an area that's, stock builder grade houses with some upgrades, and you go in and you spend $400,000 on a LeGroux stove for your kitchen because that's what you think you need to create value. You've also done it the wrong way, and you've now lost the value there too. So, really looking at what your marketplace is doing, as a trend. I mean, we're measuring trends when we're doing appraisals, right? So, and they change. Harvest gold was a thing. You find me a house with it in it right now, I'll laugh. They're going to call it super dated, and you know. But also, I've seen people tearing kitchens apart that were 15 years old that are in perfect condition, but they just don't match the market. So being up to date on the current market trends is something that I think is beneficial.
Absolutely.
to a certain extent. You don't want to let that drive everything because it is your home, but to some level that if you're trying to maximize what the market, like the biggest piece of the market, look and see what the market's doing. One of the things that I've seen a lot of in recent is the energy efficiency stuff on the level of like solar panels and things like that. So it's an interesting animal. I think there's a lot of good merit to them. I think in certain situations they work fantastic and they're definitely beneficial to the value of the property. But if you don't own them, it does nothing because all you did is sign a lease. That you basically attached a bill to the property that is just a different bill. It's the same as paying ComEd versus whatever the company that put your solar panels on. Owned ones that are paid outright. Um, Once that's proven itself out to show that it's saving you actual money, and it's not just the concept of like looking out for the environment or something like that, you you can financially kind of transact that out and go, okay, like how much did that impact the outcome of the house? There's very little true analysis that's clean that you can go, okay, you put solar panels on your house, it's a $20,000 adjustment or something.
And I would imagine with most characteristics, it would need to be prevalent and in demand in a local market as well, right?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, if you're in Portland, Seattle, where there's a lot of cloud cover, there may be less demand for solar
Sure.
panels there versus somewhere in Phoenix or Las Vegas where it's sunny 5 out of 6 days a week.
100% true. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like in my market, it's a mixed bag, right? Like there's some where you can go, okay, I get it, and it makes good sense. Um, in the new construction end of it, it makes sense. Retrofitting it, still kind of not showing itself too clean yet. Where I could go, oh, it's helpful. Um, you can always tell like what the reality is when you're reading the listing sheets and you see there's solar panels on the roof, but they make zero comments in the comments section. Like that tells me that the market isn't ready to fully embrace it and look to it as like, oh, that's a feature I must have.
Somebody would choose on balance that home over another home who doesn't have it, which of course then that implies demand, and more demand, higher price.
Sure. Those are the things, making sure you have the appropriate amount of utility for the size of the house, right? Like, don't build a 6,000 square foot house with one bedroom.
Exactly.
I mean, I would like to think I've seen them strangely enough, but, that part of it is something that could be detrimental to your value if you were only thinking about yourself in the process, which selfishly go right ahead. But reality should step in and tell you, hey, by the way, you're going to understand that, there's not as many people that think a one bedroom house at 6,000 square feet is valuable as maybe somebody with, 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever the other 6,000 square foot houses have, you know. So those are things to kind of look at when you're building a house that you're trying to then get an appraisal and financing and all that for.
So to wrap this up, then I guess what would you say? What would you tell consumers? Um, what are the things that you should do to best prepare yourself for an appraisal you'll be happy with? And I want to put an asterisk on there. Just because it's a good number doesn't necessarily mean it's a good appraisal. A good appraisal to me is one that reflects market value, right? Um, I guess what are some of those things that they should be thinking about to make sure that once they get that appraisal back, they're going to be satisfied that it accurately reflects the value in their market.
I think the level of detail in the appraisal report should be there, right? If it's I've got a team of appraisers, and I've got some that are real good at putting in a lot of detail. I've got some appraisers that are real good at coming up with the number, but their level of detail might not be up to the same par. You know, like um, if you got somebody that went into a detailed analysis, look to the addendum pages. That's going to be something that you're really going to want to take a peek
Yes,
at,
read
right?
those addendum pages.
Right. Like I liken the appraisal report to like when you were a kid. You remember those books that you would read where you could take a path. You'd like read to a spot and then it would say, choose path A, path B, or path C, right? Like there's a pull-out section to that where you go, okay, the front two pages are the meat and potatoes that really like the professionals that are trying to get this thing done for you actually need and care about to be able to facilitate your transaction. The handbook that's in the back of it that explains all of the craziness that we went through to try and help you get to that one number on the bottom of page two, that's where all the details should be. And there should be plenty of detail there. They should be talking about, you know, how did they vet their search? Where did they go? What did they look at? What were the makeups of each of these properties that you considered? Why did you give them any consideration? You know, if it's not really clear by looking at the grid, that's where like the mind of the appraiser should be displayed, so you can go, okay, you know, I might hate the number, but at least I understand that this person thought it through. You know,
I might think he's crazy, but I understand his thinking.
so of course that's you know that's going to happen. You know, we've got a wide swath of people in this industry. You know,
Right.
you know, some that are there to be the person to help you understand it, and then there's some that are like, well, listen, I know everything, and this value is not there. I've seen those, you know, and there's merit to some of that. You know, like you can't sway them. That I can tell you. And I've had appraisers like that, and they, you know, they're valuable. They're complicated. So, and I certainly wouldn't want somebody on the other side of the coin that's chucking three sales, moving on, and going, yeah, good enough. Like
Yep. Done.
that's a scary place to be when you're talking like with all the zeros at the end of these things. I hate to think that like you would prefer that outcome as a, you know, I've checked the boxes and I've moved on. Like somebody that actually cares deeply for the process to make sure that you're being looked after. You know, you are after all the customer, right? Like we
Yeah,
should be
especially
looking at
in these custom construction deals, right? I mean, people spend a lot of time, years in some
yes,
cases, a lot of money, a lot of emotional
yes,
expense at putting these projects together, and yeah, just an appraisal that's not thought out well just to get past an assignment is we don't see it very often anymore, but
no,
and fortunately, in a lot of those cases, we have the ability to get a second opinion on it.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
that's it's great when appraisers like yourself understand what it is and how important.
yeah. Yeah, I mean that part of it. It's an important piece of the equation. It can either be a stick in the wheel, which is complicated. You certainly don't want that to be the case. The appraiser doesn't either. I mean, I've always said nobody's going to pay me enough to care what the outcome of it is. Outside of, I want it to be correct. Like my pride comes into the game that says, "Listen, I want to make sure you've trusted what I've told you. You trusted me enough to tell me you wanted me to come out and look at your place and tell you what it's worth. Now I'm going to give you the respect you're due by coming in and going, okay, here's what I think's going on here. Here's the facts that I was given. Here's the results of what I have, and here's how I get resolved all of these questions that are about this property and put it into a format you can see. So, you know, the you don't want to cheap out, but you also don't want to get gouged. So I understand those parts too on the appraisal piece. But um, just getting somebody that's close or cheap or fast, I definitely would suggest not letting those be your primary filters. They should be part of it, but because there is time sensitivity and stuff, but you find somebody that knows what they're doing to help you.
For sure. Well, I thank you so much, Paul. This has been a great conversation. I will put some information in the post so people can contact you if they wanted to do,
Yeah, sure.
some of that upfront work. Yeah, this has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity. I really do appreciate it as well. So And if anybody's got questions, I'm happy to answer them. We'll see what that looks like. This is this is one of those areas I actually like. I like what I do, and I have an awful lot of experience, and I'm careful to not give you too much where I could put myself or you in a bad spot. But I'm happy to answer questions that I can, or at least direct you in a path that seems to make sense. So
perfect.
I
All
appreciate
right,
the
that's awesome.
opportunity.
Thank you again.
Be well.